My name is Lily Morgan. I am 25 years old. At 6:40 on Christmas morning, my mother tore my stocking from the mantel, hurled it into the fireplace, and spat. You have ruined every single Christmas since the day you came into this world. We never wanted you here. My father drove a garbage bag packed with my clothes into my chest, so hard my back hit the wall. Through his teeth, he growled. Finally. Take your junk and get the hell out of this house. My sister stood on the staircase, filming every second on her phone, laughing. Good luck building something from nothing, loser. Nobody in this family is going to lose any sleep over losing a useless weight like you. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took the small maple box my grandfather had given me 9 years before, walked out into the snow in my socks, and drove to Lakeshore Trust. The branch manager locked the door behind me, looked me straight in the eye, and said, Miss Morgan, have a seat. What I'm about to show you is going to rewrite everything your family just did to you. But before I tell you how my grandfather brought them down from the grave, quietly, on paper, and permanently, hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time in the comments below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Let me take you back to that morning, the right way. The version I just described happened in under 3 minutes. The morning itself had been building toward that moment for 9 years. I woke up at 6:32. The first thing I noticed was the smell of cinnamon coffee. My mother only made cinnamon coffee on Christmas morning, ever since our family had moved into my grandfather's house when I was 15. For a decade, that smell had been a signal. The family was putting on the performance. This particular morning, underneath it, I could hear too many footsteps in the hallway for 6:32 a.m. My father's heavy boots, my mother's slippers, something being dragged across the hardwood. I sat up. There was already a suitcase sitting in the middle of my room. I had not placed it there. 3 slow knocks came at my door. Then my mother's voice. Soft. The voice she used when she didn't want my sister to overhear. Sweetheart, get up. We need to talk before the others wake up. I recognized that voice. I had heard it the night before through the kitchen wall while she told my father, keep it short. Don't let her cry her way out of it. I stood up. I opened the door. She was already inside, a 40-gallon trash bag in one hand. She walked straight past me to the dresser and began pulling clothes out and dropping them in. No folding, no sorting. My late grandmother's cardigan went in the same way as my underwear. Mom, I said. My voice came out flat. What is happening? She didn't answer. Behind her, my father stood in the doorway. Steve Morgan, 54 years old, shift supervisor at a regional paper mill. He hadn't looked directly at me in nearly 2 years. He wasn't looking at me now, either. He was staring at the wall, just above my head. Then he stepped forward, took the bag from my mother's hands, and drove it against my chest hard enough that my back hit the wall. The framed family photograph from 2018, the one I was not in, fell from its nail and landed, face down on the carpet. He had hung that picture himself. Finally, he said, voice low. Take your stuff and get the hell out. Those were the most words he had spoken to me in 3 years. My mother stepped between us. Eyes bright, not with fear, not with anger, but with the energy she always had when my father acted without her direction. She took my arm and guided me toward the stairs. The tree was lit. 8 feet of balsam pine with fat-colored bulbs that had been in the family since my grandfather first bought them decades ago, glowing against the snow outside the front window. She walked me straight to the fireplace, reached up, and ripped my Christmas stocking off the mantel, the cream one with my name stitched in red thread by my grandmother, and threw it into the fire. The lining was synthetic. It went up in seconds. For just a moment the smell reminded me faintly of the cedar dust in my grandfather's workshop. Then it didn't. She turned to face me. Her expression was completely calm. You have ruined every Christmas since the day you were born, she said. We never wanted you here. My first thought, standing in front of that fireplace with my own name burning behind her, was not how could she. My first thought was of course. She had been saying it sideways for 25 years. She had finally found a stage. There were 4 stockings still on the mantel. Diane, Steve, Madison, Cody. The last one had been hung 2 weeks earlier by my sister's boyfriend, A man I had spoken to maybe a dozen times. His name was on the mantle. Mine had just become ash. Then my sister came downstairs. Madison Morgan, 22 years old. 80,000 TikTok followers. She was already filming. Phone held up, screen turned toward herself so she could watch her own face. "Hey everyone," she said into the camera. "This is real. This is happening live." She didn't look at me. Not when my mother handed the bag back to me. Not when my father unlocked the front door. Not when she tilted the phone to catch my face in the frame and laughed. "Good luck starting over, loser. Nobody in this family is going to miss a useless weight like you." I had socks on. No shoes. The cold from the open doorway hit my legs before the bruise already forming on my chest did. I picked up the maple box from the bottom step where I had set it the night before. I had carried it down there at midnight, almost without thinking, like some part of me already knew what the morning would bring. And I stepped over the threshold. The snow soaked through my socks before I reached the car. I closed the door behind me, the way my grandfather had taught me to close cabinet doors when I was 8 years old. Quietly. All the way. They thought my silence meant I had nothing to say. Silence was the first thing my grandfather ever taught me how to use. Let me tell you about my grandfather. His name was Earl Groves. Born in 1946, he spent 40 years building custom furniture out of a single-room shop on Oak Street in Cedarville. The shop smelled of cedar shavings, wood stain, and the burnt coffee from a drip machine older than I was. He wore a canvas work apron, with a crescent-shaped scorch mark on the right side, from a piece of oak that had jumped off his lathe. He never replaced it. He said the mark meant the apron was being used properly. When I was 8, my mother started dropping me off at his shop in the afternoons. My sister, who was 5, was already enrolled in 3 different enrichment programs. I was not in any of them. My grandfather would meet my mother at the door, lift the backpack off my shoulders, and say, "We have work to do," never to my mother. Always to me. He handed me pine boards and a square of 120 grit sandpaper. "Always go with the grain," he said. "Push against it, and you'll tear what you're trying to smooth." People work the same way. I sanded pine for the next 10 years. In the summer of 2015, my grandmother passed away. Evelyn Groves, a stroke at the kitchen sink in June. My mother decided we should move in, to help my grandfather manage the house. My father didn't argue. He had just transferred to a new facility, and we had recently sold our small home for $178,000. My grandfather had a 4-bedroom house he had built by hand in 1971. He cleared out his study for my sister and me to share, and moved his workbench into the corner. I was 15. The first night, I heard my mother in the hallway telling my father, "Just hang in there. He's 71. Maybe 5 more years." Even at 15, I knew that's not something you say about your own father. I rolled over. When I got up an hour later to use the bathroom, my grandfather was standing in the hallway, in his gray flannel pajamas, with a glass of water in his hand. He had heard it before I did. He had been standing there longer than I had been awake. He didn't say anything. He just stepped aside so I could pass. But the next morning, he asked me to come to the shop on Sundays. I went every Sunday from that summer, until the week before he died. In May of 2016, my mother slapped me at a Memorial Day cookout. She had misplaced a bracelet, silver, bought for herself, nothing valuable, and announced to 14 guests that I must have taken it. When I said, "Mom, I didn't take it," she crossed the yard in 2 strides and struck me hard enough to leave the outline of her hand on my cheek. My sister laughed. My father looked at his shoes. My grandfather walked over from the grill, placed his palm flat between my shoulder blades, and guided me into the kitchen. He filled a dish towel with ice and held it to my face himself. Then he said, quietly, "Don't cry in front of her. Save it. Save everything." The following afternoon, he asked me to come to the shop. When I walked in, he was standing at the workbench with a small box in both hands. Maple wood. 12 inches long, 8 wide, 5 deep. Dovetailed corners. A thin walnut border inlaid around the lid, and burned into the top with the tip of an old soldering iron, for Lily Groves. 2016. He held it out flat on his palms, the way you hold something fragile. "Don't open this," he said. "Just keep it. Any time, any reason, any hour." I kept it at the bottom of my closet for the next 9.5 years. I never looked inside. There is one more thing about my grandfather I need to tell you. Every Christmas Eve, from the year I was 12, until the year he died, he found a reason to take me out to the shop, to help him tidy up, to put the year to bed. He always called it. And every Christmas Day, somewhere between the presents and the meal, my mother would announce, quietly to a relative, or loudly in front of a room full of guests, that I had ruined Christmas again. The year I was 8, I dropped a glass ornament. At 13, I left the burner on under the mulled cider. At 17, I hadn't smiled correctly in the photograph. Every year, a different cause. Every year, the exact same sentence. You ruin every Christmas. She delivered it like a weather report. Like it was simply the forecast. My grandfather spent 13 Christmas Eves, keeping me out of the kitchen, so she would have one fewer excuse to reach for. He got sick in the fall of 2024, pancreatic cancer, and it moved fast. He died in October, at 78. At the reception after the funeral, my mother cried harder than anyone else in the room. She stood near the bookshelf and accepted condolences, with one hand pressed to her chest, like she had personally earned the grief. The entire time, I watched her eyes drift toward the top shelf, where my grandfather kept his bourbon and a row of important papers. She looked at that shelf the way someone looks at a door they already know they have the key to. She was calculating the inheritance, and she hadn't even taken her coat off. There is a particular arithmetic that certain families practice. From the outside, it looks like generosity. One child gets summer camp. One child gets private school. One child gets the larger bedroom because she is artistic. From the inside, the math is simpler. There is one child money flows toward freely, and there is one child whose existence is treated as a deduction. My sister attended Pinecrest Academy, the local private school, from 6th grade through 12th. Tuition was $22,000 per year. She never held a summer job. She went because my mother had decided, when my sister was 8, that she had the spark. I went to public school. When I was 17, and asked whether there might be any money set aside for college, my mother folded her hands and said in a voice she had clearly practiced, "Honey, college might not really be your path. You're not really academic. Maybe community college, but only if you can work for it yourself." So I worked for it. 3 years waiting tables at a lakefront restaurant, an associate degree in horticulture, $11,000 in student loans, entirely mine. I stopped asking for things after that. What I did not know, what I would not know until I walked into Lakeshore Trust, was that there had always been money for me. It had simply gone somewhere else. That same summer, my sister borrowed my car to film a TikTok at a state park and scraped it down the entire driver's side on a concrete barrier. The body shop quoted on $1,900. My mother called me into the kitchen, laid the invoice on the table beside a tin of cookies my grandfather had once given her, and said in her warm voice, "Sweetheart, your sister's platform is really gaining momentum. The family needs to rally behind her right now. You're the responsible one. Can you handle this? This family runs on people stepping up." I paid the $1,900. 2 weeks later, my sister walked into the kitchen with a brand new tablet still in the box. $1,300. Brand deal money she hadn't mentioned to anyone. She showed it to me while she made coffee on a Saturday morning. She did not say thank you. She didn't even know there had been a car repair. She had not been told. Stop here for a second. I want to ask you something. Have you ever had someone in your family subtract your worth out loud? Not in a fight, not in anger, just quietly on a Tuesday afternoon while they're stirring sugar into their coffee. That calm little sentence that tells you exactly where you land in the family ledger. If you have, type "I heard it too" in the comments below. I want us to know we're not alone in this. In November of 2025, my mother updated her Facebook page with a new banner. "Big changes coming for the Morgan family. God is moving." It received 160 likes. She had over 9,000 followers on a lifestyle blog she ran called A Cherished Life by Diane. She was a hairstylist. She hosted a Bible study in our kitchen every Tuesday. Her followers considered her an inspiration. That same week, my sister's boyfriend Cody moved in. Cody Hartwell, 24, fitness content creator, 30,000 TikTok followers. He took over my grandfather's old reading nook, the little room with the green walls where I had learned to play cribbage at 9, and repainted it gray in 2 days. On the third day he said to me, unprompted, "No offense, but your vibe doesn't really fit the brand we're building here." I said nothing. I went upstairs. On the night of December 24th, I came down for water near midnight, and heard my parents in the dark kitchen. "After tomorrow," my mother said quietly, "it'll just be our real family." My father didn't respond. He poured the rest of his drink down the drain, washed the glass, and walked past me on the stairs without seeing me. I went back to my room. I took the maple box out of the closet for the first time in years and set it on my nightstand. I looked at the letters burned into the lid. For Lily Groves, 2016. I did not open it. I slept for 4 hours. When I woke at 6:32 the next morning, it was already happening. I drove east on the main road with the heat turned all the way up, the trash bag in the passenger seat, and the maple box sitting on the dashboard. No shoes, wool socks. The tops of my feet were red from the snow, and the bruise forming on my collarbone was already turning dark. I pulled into an empty grocery store parking lot at 9:08 a.m. Christmas morning, nearly deserted. I parked near the cart return, turned off the engine, and sat. I picked up the maple box and set it on my lap. I had never seen what was inside. My grandfather had given it to me when I was 16 and told me not to open it. I had not opened it. The lid fit so precisely, I had to press the heel of my hand against it to get it to give. When it did, the smell that came out was 9 years old, cedar, faint, and the dry, still scent of paper that has been waiting in wood for a long time. There were 4 things inside. The first was a brass house key, heavy in the way old keys are, not like anything made recently, tied to a small leather tag, and on the tag in my grandfather's handwriting, "Front door, 1971, the key he had worn on his belt loop every day of my life." The second was a folded square of yellow notepad paper, smaller than my palm. Inside, in pencil that had not faded, "Any time, any reason, any hour." The third was a business card, white, simple. Lakeshore Trust, Cedarville. Frank Waverly, branch manager. On the back, in my grandfather's handwriting, a number, 851209. And one line, "Tell Frank you're the granddaughter. He'll know." The fourth was a photograph. Black and white, 4 by 6 inches. The edges gone soft and slightly curled with age. My grandfather, looking younger, stronger, standing in the orchard behind the house, holding a baby wrapped in a white knitted blanket. On the back, in pencil, May 18th, 2000. First morning. That was the day I was born. I had never seen that photograph. I didn't know it existed. I sat in that parking lot with the photograph held between my fingers, and I cried for the first time that morning. Not loudly. I am not loud. 2 minutes, with the engine running, and the heat going, and the snow drifting softly onto the windshield. Then I put the photograph back into the box, and I started the car. I tried calling my mother. She had blocked me. The voicemail box was full. I called my father. No answer. I called Priya, the only close friend I still had, from the floral shop where I'd worked. She was visiting family out of state. She picked up with noise in the background and asked if I was okay. I said yes. I said I'd call her tomorrow. I hung up. I drove downtown. I didn't know what I was about to walk into. I knew only that I had nowhere else to go, and that on a small yellow square of notepad paper, my grandfather had written any time, any reason, any hour, and that the bank he had named was open and 8 blocks away. Lakeshore Trust stood on Main Street in downtown Cedarville, between a coffee shop and a stationery store, in a brick building that dated back to the early 1900s. The brass door handle had been worn smooth by 100 years of hands. I pushed through it. The lobby was warm. Old marble floors, gray with dark veins running through. A small artificial Christmas tree in the corner near the teller windows. The faint smell of a cinnamon candle burning somewhere nearby. 2 tellers were on duty. One of them, a woman in her late 40s, reading glasses on a beaded chain, looked up as I crossed, the lobby in my wool socks and gray sweater, the bruise already visible above my collarbone. She did not flinch. She smiled with professional warmth. I respected her for that. I set the business card on the counter. My grandfather gave me this. I think there might be an account. She glanced at the front, then at the back, then at my face. For just a half-second longer than necessary, she picked up the desk phone, pressed a single button, spoke into it quietly, and hung up. Mr. Waverly is coming out to meet you personally, she said. Would you like a glass of water while you wait? Yes, please. 40 seconds later, a man in his early 60s walked out of a corner office. He wore a brown cardigan, with a worn patch on the right shoulder, the same wear pattern as the cardigan my grandfather had owned for years. He stopped about 10 feet from me. Miss Morgan. It was not a question. He was confirming something he already knew. Yes. Please come with me. Bring the box. I had not mentioned a box. He had not seen the tote bag I was carrying it in. He glanced at the bag briefly, then turned and walked without waiting for me to respond. His office was at the back of the building. Wooden desk. I recognized it before I fully understood why. My grandfather had built it. I was certain of it. The joinery at the corners. The proportions. The particular way the finish had aged. On the wall to the right hung a photograph. 2 men in fishing waders on a dock at a lake. One of them was Frank, 20 years younger. The other was my grandfather. Frank stepped past me, closed the office door, and locked it. He walked to the windows and pulled each blind down, one by one. Then he sat across from me and folded his hands flat on the desk. Miss Morgan, he said, your grandfather has been waiting for this day for 9 years. I have been waiting alongside him. He opened the bottom left drawer and lifted out a navy blue folder. The cardboard cover had softened at the corners from years of handling. On the front, in my grandfather's handwriting, for Lily. Hold until she comes in. He placed the folder on the desk between us. Sit down, Miss Morgan. What I'm about to show you is going to rewrite everything your family did to you this morning. He set a manila envelope next to the folder. Open the box first. Show me. I placed the maple box on the desk and lifted the lid. He looked at the 4 items inside. He smiled at the key, the way you smile at a face you have known for 30 years. He reached across, picked it up, and held it toward the light. He carried that on his belt loop for over 40 years, he said. He had a copy made in 2016. He gave the copy to me. He gave the original to you. He told me, Frank, when she walks in carrying that key, stop whatever you're doing. Take her to the office, close the door, and tell her the truth. So that is what I am doing. He set the key down. This is the front door key to 712 Maplewood Lane, Miss Morgan. He paused. Your house. The room shifted, not a metaphor, an actual physical shift. Frank must have seen it, because he reached across the desk and placed one hand flat over mine. Take your time, he said. I did. He pushed the navy folder toward me and opened it to the first page. A notarized photocopy. Groves Family Revocable Living Trust. Grantor, Earl Groves. Successor trustee, Frank Waverly. Sole beneficiary, Lily Ann Morgan. The signature was my grandfather's. The date was August 8, 2016. 63 days after my mother had slapped me at the barbecue. Frank spent the next 35 minutes walking me through that file, the way you walk someone, through the rules of a game they have never played. No legal jargon, no performance. Just patience. He explained each document as if he were talking to his own granddaughter. In August of 2016, he said, your grandfather walked into Holt & Associates, 4 blocks from here. He sat down across from Margaret Holt and asked her a single question. Can I put my house in my granddaughter's name, without my daughter ever finding out? Margaret told him yes. He came back the following Tuesday with a money order and a carpenter's pencil from his shop, because he didn't trust the pens she kept in her office. She made him sign the final documents in pen anyway. A quiet smile. He told me that part himself. He turned the page. As of August 9, 2016, the property was no longer in your grandfather's name. It was held inside the Groves Family Revocable Living Trust. Your grandfather retained a life estate, the right to live in the home until the day he died. But the underlying title belonged to the trust, and the trust belonged to you. No probate, no court hearing, no daughter who needed to be informed at any point. He turned another page. Your parents have been living in your house for 14 months without paying you rent. He let that sit in the room between us. He turned another page. Payable on death account. Opened March 2020. Sole named beneficiary, Lily Ann Morgan. Balance at the time of grantor's death, $82,000. The day he died, this account transferred to you by operation of law. Frank showed me a handwritten ledger. He came in every spring and added to it in cash. Small bills, always from custom furniture commissions he kept separate. The last deposit was $4,000 in August of 2024, 2 months before he checked into the hospital. The note he asked me to record that year said, "For the year she'll need it." I had to stare at the ceiling for a moment. When I looked back down, Frank had opened the manila envelope. 3 printed pages on bank letterhead, a small initialed stamp in the bottom right corner of each. F. Branch manager. The first page was dated 8 days after my grandfather's funeral. Diane Morgan appeared at branch, requesting release of father's accounts to next of kin. Informed account holder did not designate her as beneficiary. Left agitated. The second was dated the following May. Diane Morgan appeared with certified copy of birth certificate, requesting reversal of rightful its beneficiary designation on grounds of rightful inheritance. Informed designation is irrevocable. Left agitated. The third was dated September, 3 months before Christmas morning. Diane Morgan appeared with husband Steve Morgan, requesting a meeting to discuss family hardship. Informed that beneficiary designation cannot be contested without legal cause. Steve Morgan raised his voice. Upon leaving, Diane Morgan stated, "She doesn't even know. She doesn't deserve to know." I read that last line 3 times. "She came here 3 times, I said quietly. "Yes. And you never contacted me. Your grandfather's instructions were clear. I was not to reach out to you. He said you would come in when you were ready. He was very specific about that." Frank paused. "He also told me if your mother ever appeared here 3 times, it meant she was about to do something to you. Something direct." He looked at me carefully. "You walked in this morning, Miss Morgan. I take it she did something direct." I didn't answer. He didn't push. He turned to the last page. An owner's title insurance policy, paid in full, dated August 9, 2016. This protects your ownership against any challenge, any claim from family, anyone at all. If anyone attempts to contest your title, this policy covers your legal defense costs entirely. He slid one final page toward me. An asset summary. Real property, 712 Maplewood Lane. Approximate market value, $335,000. Payable on death account, Lakeshore Trust, $82,000. Woodworking equipment and lathe, $24,000. 2008 pickup truck, $9,500. Total, approximately $450,500. Frank tapped the page once with his index finger. "Miss Morgan, your mother told 3 of my staff members on 3 separate visits that you were a useless burden." He looked at me steadily. "I am sitting here with $450,000 of evidence to the contrary." He closed the folder and placed both palms flat on top of it. "Your grandfather didn't just leave you assets. He left you the receipts." "There is one more thing he left you," Frank said. "But it isn't paper. Come with me. Safe deposit box 218. Frank pulled the long steel drawer out and set it on the small wooden table in the private room. "Take all the time you need," he said, and pulled the door most of the way closed behind him. 2 things inside. The first was a sealed envelope, cream-colored, slightly aged at the edges. On the front, in my grandfather's handwriting, "For my granddaughter, when you're ready to come home." The second was something wrapped in gray flannel. The flannel was instantly familiar. The same flannel pajamas he had been wearing in the hallway. The night I was 15. The night my mother had been counting down his remaining years to my father, through the kitchen wall. I unwrapped it. A small brass key on a wire ring. Tied to the ring was a folded index card. On the front, in his handwriting, old-fashioned. "For when you have your own kitchen." On the back, the actual recipe. The key was to his liquor cabinet. I opened the envelope. 2 pages. The handwriting on the first page was steady. On the second, it sloped slightly downward at the end of every line. The way his hand had trembled. "In the last year of his life. Sweetheart, if you're reading this, Then your mother did what I always knew she eventually would. I'm sorry I'm not there with you. I could only get out ahead of her. I saw all of it. The bracelet at the barbecue. The bedroom they gave to your sister. The night I heard her count down my years through the wall. I never said it out loud, because I knew that if I did, you would feel like you had to choose. I never wanted to put that on you. I wanted to make the choice unnecessary, so I made it unnecessary. The house is yours. The account is yours. The receipts are yours. None of it can be taken back. You are not a burden. You never were. You were the one who came to the shop. You were the one who learned to sand with the grain. You are the only person in that house who ever knew how to close a door quietly. Don't apologize. Don't explain. Just come home. I love you, sweetheart. Grandpa, I sat with that letter for a long time. When I came out, Frank was waiting in the corridor with his hands in the pockets of the brown cardigan. He didn't ask anything. He walked me back through the lobby. It was 12:47 p.m. I had been inside Lakeshore Trust for 3 hours and 22 minutes. When I turned my phone on in the parking lot, it had been buzzing the entire time. 24 missed calls from my mother, 5 from my father, 1 from my sister, 7 voicemails. The first, at 9:14 a.m., was rushed and high-pitched. Honey, I think we moved too fast this morning. Come home. We can talk. The third, at 11:22 a.m., had sharpened. If you've been to the bank, you need to understand that this money belongs to the whole family. Your grandfather wasn't well at the end. We can sort this out together. The fifth was my sister. 9 seconds. Sue, my video is kind of going viral. Might be a problem. Call mom. The sixth, at 12:40, was my mother in a near whisper. Whatever they told you in there, he was sick. You know he was sick. We can handle this as a family. I deleted them all. I drove to a Holiday Inn Express outside town. $89 a night. I paid with my debit card from my bartending tips. The clerk handed me a key card and asked if there was anything I needed. I went up to the room. I locked the door. I read the letter one more time. Then I put it inside the Navy folder, turned off my phone, and slept for the first time in over 26 hours. When I woke the next morning, the sky outside was just beginning to gray. I picked up my phone. I dialed the number Frank had written down for me before I left the bank the day before. Margaret Holt, attorney at law. She picked up on the second ring. Miss Morgan, Frank told me you'd be calling. Can you come in this morning? Yes. Margaret Holt's office was on the second floor of a yellow brick building on the main street downtown. Her name was on a brass plaque beside the door. Holt and Associates. Est. 1987. She was in her late 60s. Silver hair past her shoulders. A charcoal blazer over a cream silk blouse. She stood when I came in, shook my hand in both of hers and said, "You have his eyes." She poured me coffee from a French press. She slid a plate of shortbread cookies across the desk and gave it a gentle push. "Have one." I had one. Then she opened a navy folder identical to Frank's. Her own copy, kept for 9 years in her filing cabinet, pulled that morning, the moment Frank had called her at home the evening before. Your grandfather structured everything in 2016 with a single outcome in mind, she said. Today, we put it into motion. You sign 2 documents. I handle the rest. She slid the first page across to me. 30-day notice to quit. Under Michigan law, a person occupying a property without a lease, without paying rent, and without any legal interest in the property, is classified as a tenant at will. Your parents, your sister, and her boyfriend all fall into that category. The law is clear. You serve them notice. If they haven't vacated within 30 days, I file a summary proceedings complaint at the district court. A hearing gets scheduled within 7 to 10 days. They will have no legal defense, no lease, no beneficiary status, no equity stake. The court issues a default judgment for possession. After a 10-day appeal window, a writ of restitution is issued, and the sheriff schedules the lockout. She looked at me over her reading glasses. You don't owe them a fight, Miss Morgan. You owe them paperwork. Michigan law does the rest. I signed both documents with the heavy pen she handed me. There is no ceremony in justice. Justice is a ballpoint pen and a Wednesday morning. She scanned the signed pages and forwarded them by encrypted email to a process server she had worked with for over 2 decades. Notice to be served December 28th. The 30-day period would end January 27th. If they were still in the house on January 28th, Margaret would file with the court that same morning. She gave me a measured smile. They will still be there on January 28th, Miss Morgan. People like your mother always believe the law is bluffing. The process server's name was Sandra Briggs, licensed in 3 counties, body camera worn on her vest every day, because she had been screamed at by enough people over the years to stop trusting memory alone. She arrived at 712 Maplewood Lane at 10:14 a.m. on December 28th and rang the doorbell. My mother answered in a plastic salon cape, halfway through a color appointment for one of her Bible study regulars. She opened the door with the polished public smile she had spent a lifetime cultivating. Sandra smiled back, briefly, professionally. Mrs. Morgan, I have a 30-day notice to quit, issued by the legal owner of this property. Today is December 28th. The period begins now. My mother's expression shifted slowly, the way understanding settles on someone who has decided not to accept it. She held the document like the words were written in a language she had chosen not to speak. This is a mistake. Service is complete whether or not you sign, ma'am. The clock begins today. My mother tore the notice in half in front of her. The woman inside in the foil highlights made an audible sound. Sandra's face didn't change. That's fine. I have 3 additional copies and a body camera, confirming service. Have a good day. She walked back to her car and drove away. My mother stood in the doorway, holding 2 halves of a document. Beneath the attorney's signature, even in 2 pieces, she could read the line, "On behalf of property owner, Lily Ann Morgan." Within the week, my mother had sent 11 emails to Margaret Holt, mailed 1 handwritten letter, and appeared at the office twice without an appointment. Margaret sent a single response to all 11 emails, 1 line, "Mrs. Morgan, my client is under no obligation to speak with you. Goodbye." My mother hired a lawyer. His name was Jason Whitmore, 2 years out of law school, a shared office in a strip mall on the highway. He read the trust. He read the title insurance policy. He called my mother on the second day. "Ma'am, you have no case. No beneficiary standing. No lease agreement. There's a title insurance policy, protecting the ownership. I'll send you my invoice." His invoice was $410. On January 28th, with my family still in the house, Margaret walked the filing fee across the file street to the district court clerk and placed a summary proceedings complaint on the desk. Hearing set for February 5th. My parents arrived without legal counsel. The judge, a woman named Judge Winifred Carr, 17 years on the bench, read the trust. She read the deed. She looked at my parents over her glasses for several seconds. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, the deed is unambiguous. The legal owner is requesting possession. The court grants it. You have until February 21st. Default judgment for possession. 10-day appeal window. No appeal filed. Writ of restitution issued February 16th. Margaret called me on a Friday evening while I was eating soup from a styrofoam container in my men's hotel room. "The sheriff's office has confirmed the lockout for Monday, February 21st at 10:30 a.m. Deputy Calloway will be on site with a locksmith. We don't ask anymore. We just show up." I was not at the house. I learned about most of it the same way the rest of the country did, from a screen. My mother had spent the previous week trying to get local news outlets interested in her side of law. 3 declined. A local podcast host spent an hour doing basic research and then declined. By the morning of February 21st, she had decided to broadcast it herself. She didn't have her own TikTok account. She used my sister's. At 10 a.m., my mother sat down on the living room couch wearing a white cardigan she had chosen. Deliberately. She believed white communicated innocence. My sister set up the ring light, checked her own makeup 3 times in the front camera, then flipped the phone around to face our mother. "Mom," my sister said. "You sure? My account is finally starting to recover. This will make us go viral the right way," my mother said. She went live at exactly 10:30. 12 viewers. She began crying before she spoke a single word. A strategic mistake. She hadn't paced the emotion. The comments noticed immediately. By 3 minutes in, 700 viewers. By 5 minutes, nearly 4,000. By 8 minutes, over 10,000. Then she said the sentence that ended her. After everything I gave up for her, she made me put her stocking in the fire. She made me. The comments collapsed all at once. Wait, you burned her stocking? Ma'am, you just admitted that on camera. Whose house even is this? Where is the daughter? By 10:48, 17,000 viewers. By 10:55, 40,000. By 11, when the knock came at the door, 56,000. My mother heard the knock. She brightened. She turned to the camera. That's probably the news, sweetheart. See? They're finally coming for our story. And she walked to the front door and opened it. Deputy Sheriff Marcus Calloway stood on the porch, dark green winter uniform, clipboard in hand, a printed writ of restitution. One backup officer behind him, a locksmith with a tool bag. The phone was still filming. Mrs. Morgan, I have a court-ordered writ of restitution. Time to vacate. My mother's mouth opened. 60,000 people watched it happen in real time. Excuse me. This property belongs to Lily Ann Morgan by court order. You have 30 minutes to collect essential personal items. Anything left behind will be inventoried by the sheriff's and made available for pickup within 30 days. The comments detonated. The daughter owns the house. Oh my God. This is the biggest plot twist I have ever seen live. Where is Lily? Protect Lily. My sister, standing behind my mother, holding the ring light, let it drop. The color drained from her face. The stream cut for 2 seconds. When it came back, my mother had completely forgotten the camera was on. My father came out from the kitchen, where he had been sitting at the breakfast table all morning, with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour before. He walked past my mother, past the deputy, all the way out to the porch. He sat down on the second step. He put both hands on his knees. He looked out at the snow on the lawn for a long time without speaking. Then, quietly, he said, "She owns the house." A pause. Then he said it again, slightly louder. "She always did." The phone caught every word. My mother turned. Something was happening in her face. Something I think was the first genuinely unguarded expression she had worn in 25 years. "Why didn't you ever fight for me?" she said. My father looked up at her from the second step. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he said, "Because what we did was wrong." The live stream ended. My sister deactivated her account within 12 hours. By then, someone had already clipped the moment my father sat down on the step. She owns the house. She always did. And it had crossed 4 million views on X within 48 hours. If you've ever wondered whether walking away is the same as giving up, it isn't. Putting something heavy down is not surrender. It's gravity finally working, the way it was always supposed to. Take a breath here with me. Then, let's talk about what happened after the door closed. My parents moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a town about 30 miles south of Cedarville. Second floor of a converted older building above a physiotherapy office. $1,400 a month. No fireplace. My mother had asked specifically for one and had to settle without. When they had moved into my grandfather's house in 2015, they had sold their previous home for $178,000. A decade of savings, plus the sale had accumulated somewhere, and I eventually learned from my aunt over coffee exactly where it had gone. $162,000 to Pinecrest Academy, over 7 years of tuition. $19,000 to a salon my mother had launched in 2019 and closed quietly in 2020. Multiple vacations she had never taken me on. $7,000 invested in a merchandise line by a fitness influencer named Cody Hartwell, a line that never produced a single item. By the time of the lockout, they had $28,000 in their joint account, and a retirement fund my father could not touch without penalty for another 6 years. The apartment deposit took nearly half their remaining savings. My mother shut down her cherished life blog 2 weeks later, because the top comment on every old post, every inspirational verse, every staged Sunday morning snapshot, was a stranger asking some version of the same question: where is Lily? The pastor from her church called once. He didn't raise his voice. He said, "We saw the video, Diane. Take some time." She did not go back to that church. My sister lost 4 brand partnerships in a single week. Skincare, activewear, a meal kit company, a water bottle brand. The skincare company's email, which someone later shared as a screenshot on Reddit, read, "We are not comfortable with the association, given the events recently documented in your live stream." My sister's boyfriend Cody ended things by text 6 days after the lockout. 9 words. "This isn't the brand I'm building. I'm out." He unfollowed her on every platform within the hour. My sister moved back in with my parents at the end of March. She had 3,800 followers remaining on her new account. She slept on the pull-out sofa in the living room. She did not speak to my mother for 3 weeks. On March 4th, my mother sent me a text. "We did the best we could with what we had. One day you'll understand." I didn't reply. On March 21st, my father sent me a longer message. The first he had ever written to me, entirely on his own. "Lily, I know you don't owe me a reading of this. I'm writing it, because I owe you the writing. I should have stepped in. 30 times over 25 years. I should have said something. I didn't. I'm the kind of man who doesn't stop things when he should. I understand that now. I won't contact you again unless you tell me you want me to. I am sorry. Not because I expect it to change anything. Because it is the only honest thing I still have to offer." Dad, I read that message 14 times. I did not reply. But I did not delete it either. On March 28th, a Saturday morning, 3 months and 3 days after Christmas, I drove up Maplewood Lane for the first time. The snow had pulled back from the lawn. The air was still cold. Deputy Calloway was waiting on the porch with a small ring of new keys. "Welcome home, Miss Morgan," he said. I had cried 4 times since Christmas morning. I did not cry now. I shook his hand. I unlocked the front door with the original brass key, the one my grandfather had worn on his belt loop for over 40 years, and I stepped inside. The living room was empty. They had taken what they considered theirs. The fireplace was cold and clean. The hardwood floors my grandfather had laid in 1971 were still there. And underneath everything else, very faint, the smell of cedar was still there. I set the maple box on the mantel where my stocking used to hang. In the first week of April, I went up to the attic. I hadn't been up there in years. I climbed the folding ladder with a flashlight. It smelled of settled dust and old pine boards. In the far corner, tucked under the low part of the eave, was a cardboard box I didn't recognize. Flaps folded shut. Written across the top in my grandfather's handwriting, "Lily, 2020. I sat down on the floorboards. I pulled the box toward me. I opened the flaps. Inside were 5 things. The first was a Christmas stocking. Soft cream wool. My name embroidered along the cuff in red thread. Slightly uneven, the way stitching looks when it's done by an old man whose hands have begun to shake, working alone in the evenings without telling anyone. On the inside cuff, where the lining met the wool, he had stitched 4 small letters, Groves, 2020. The second, third, fourth, and fifth things were small maple boxes, identical to the one he had made for me at 16. Same dovetailed corners, same hinges, same inlaid border along each lid. 4 more. 4 backup plans, in case the first one wasn't enough. I knelt on those attic floorboards in the cold and the dust, and I held the stocking against my chest. And for the first time since I was 8 years old, I cried. The way you cry when you are not afraid of being heard. I cried because he had been making stockings for me since the year I had learned how to stop crying. He had been stitching my name into wool in the evenings, while my mother was stitching a different story about me into the understanding of everyone around us. He had been working quietly against her, and I hadn't known. Every single time my mother told me I had ruined every Christmas since I was born. Every single time, he had been 1 floor below with a needle in his hand, building me a Christmas that did not depend on her permission. I carried the box downstairs. I hung the stocking on the mantel. I left the 4 backup maple boxes on the workbench in the corner, where I could always see them. I moved the workbench out from the corner, and set it back in the center of the room, the way it always had been. I laid his chisels out in order of size, the way he had shown me when I was 9. I tied on his canvas apron, the one with the crescent-shaped burn on the right side. I am not a furniture maker. I will probably never be a furniture maker, but I will learn the way he taught me. Sand with the grain. Always with the grain. People are the same. One last thing. My grandfather did not save me. people will want to say he saved me. That isn't quite right. He prepared a door and left it where I could find it when I was ready. The hand on the door handle at 6:40 on Christmas morning, in my socks, in the snow, was my own. I brought the walls down on paper, quietly and completely, the way he had spent years teaching me without ever calling it a lesson. What he did, the thing that only love does, was the thing he did 9 years before I needed it. He saw what was coming. He drafted the trust. He signed it with a carpenter's pencil. He stitched my name into a stocking I wouldn't find for nearly 5 years. He put a key in a maple box and told me, any time, any reason, any hour. And then he held that knowledge for 9 years without ever telling me, because he didn't want me to feel like I had to choose between my mother and the truth before I was ready to hold both. The world will sometimes try to make you feel like a liability. The math will sometimes look that way. That is not love's math. Love's math is quieter. It is being one floor below, in the years before the storm, with a needle in your hand and a plan. Some people don't make the key for you the day you need it. They make it years in advance, when they can see the storm coming from the horizon. They put it somewhere safe. They wait. If you have ever been the quiet one in a loud family, listen. The people who love you don't always say it out loud. Sometimes they sign the deed. Sometimes they stitch your name into wool. Sometimes they spend 9 years building a door. And they put it exactly where you will find it when you finally have to walk through one. My name is Lily Morgan. I am 25 years old. I live at 712 Maplewood Lane, in the house my grandfather built with his own hands in 1971, and left to me in 2016, and delivered to me through a brass key in a maple box on the coldest morning of my life. I have a fireplace. I have a stocking on the mantel with my name in red thread. And I have a door. The door he built for me, before I knew I would ever need one. I closed it tonight.